Shabbos, Shabbat Shalom, happy Saturday. Rabbi Cohen and Father Smith are lifelong friends. Every Sunday after Mass, they go tee off at a local golf club. One Sunday, as they're golfing, they reach the 9-hole when they notice the group ahead taking a particularly long amount of time. They wait 10 minutes, 15 minutes, they both become frustrated. What could be the holdup, asks the rabbi. At this point, they're almost ready to quit. So Father Smith says, "It's okay, Gerald, I'll go ahead and I'll see what's going on." Father Smith hastily walks towards the group, thinking about how he's going to tell them off. As he reaches the 10th hole, he stops in his track, turns around, races back up the hill. "Gerald, Gerald," he shouts excitedly, "you're never going to believe this. The group of golfers ahead of us is blind. How inspiring. This is transformational. We must dedicate our sermons to this." The rabbi looks at his friend and says, "George, if they're blind, why can't they just play at night?" This makes sense. When Isaac was born, he was diagnosed with an extremely rare disease that rendered him blind in both eyes. When he was born, we quickly scoured the internet for resources, looked for information on where to turn, and we found a doctor in Miami who was the best in her field, a pioneer, an innovator. She was a legend amongst her peers. So, of course, we went to see her. And hearing her say, "I'm sorry, there is nothing I can do," shook us to our core. There we were, first-time parents with a baby less than a month old, confronted with this harsh reality that we were not in control. In that moment, all we could think was, how will we be prepared to raise him? Now, of course, those questions quickly disappeared. You know Isaac. We all know Isaac. The first time he touched my face, those questions disappeared. I knew that he could see. He could see what his eyes could not. I think we are all blinded in some way. And while our eyes may have vision, often our hearts, our minds, and our conscience are shackled to bias, to prejudice, and a lack of understanding that really infiltrate us. We often see people who have disabilities, whether physical, emotional, cognitive, or behavioral, as the other. And so today I invite us to study together this question: how do we reconcile our blindness with our desire and obligation as Jewish institutions and as people to be open? And I encourage us to review the life of our matriarch Sarah, for a potential answer to this question. Today's Torah portion, Chaye Sarah, meaning the life of Sarah, opens with Sarah's death. And it is in remembering Sarah that we find her legacy. In her death, we discover her life, and in that dark, narrow space, we find light, truth, and a deep optimism that comes from understanding who Sarah was and the importance of her existence. And there are really two defining moments that, at least for me, help answer the question we asked before. The first is when the Torah teaches of Sarah's insistence on opening the tent she and Abraham share to strangers. It is Sarah who provides water, shelter, and food to not only the strangers, but their livestock. Without even asking a question, she opens up her home and her heart. The second is when Sarah has the courage to laugh at herself and to laugh at God, to laugh at her own misfortune. In Genesis chapter 18, verse 12, we read, "Vatitza'ak Sarah bikirba lemor, acharei beloti hayta li edna vadoni zakein." And Sarah laughed at herself and at God when God promised Sarah a child. Sarah is old and skeptical of this promise, but she displays unbelievable courage by choosing to laugh at her own misfortune. And it is that ability to laugh at herself that, for me, defines Sarah's legacy. You see, Sarah was kind of a tortured soul. She endured emotional trauma from years of not being able to conceive. And then when she finally has a child, her husband Abraham almost sacrifices their bloodline. On the merits, Sarah has reason to drown in her own tears, but she doesn't. Through her personal pain, she remains steadfast in her commitment to humankind. There's a beautiful midrash, a story that teaches when Sarah was 20, she had the innocence of a 7-year-old. And when she was 100, she retained the beauty of a 20-year-old. This teaching suggests that Sarah was pure, holy, and spirited until her dying day, and although her body failed her, her heart remained true, and the condition of her soul intact. I read these verses in our Torah about Sarah opening up her tent to the stranger as a metaphor and really a guide for the lives we should aspire to. By keeping ourselves open to the possibility of feeling a genuine sense of connectedness with strangers, with people who are not like us, by trying, albeit difficult, to understand the differences that often divide us. Perhaps you remember the children's book by Bernard Weber called Ira Has a Sleepover. In the book, Ira and his friend Reggie plan a sleepover. The only problem for Ira is that he goes to sleep every night with a teddy bear, and he fears that if he takes this teddy bear to Reggie's house, he'll be laughed at by his friend. Finally, the day of the sleepover arrives, and he decides to leave the bear at home. He and Reggie play into the night, and when it comes time to go to sleep, they shut off the light, and Ira hears Reggie open the drawer, and Reggie pulls out something. "What's that?" Ira asks. "Oh," says Reggie, "this is my teddy bear, Fufu. I sleep with him every night." So much of what we do, so much of who we are is hidden. We hide that which we don't want people to see with their eyes. We disclose only the information that we think others won't be able to judge us on. We say to ourselves, if only they knew that, surely that would be too much. Sarah's life and today's Torah portion fundamentally, I think, is about inclusion. It's about welcoming the stranger, welcoming the poor and the downtrodden, welcoming those who are seen as different, who are seen as the other. And more importantly, Chayei Sarah is a beautiful example of what happens when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable and laugh at ourselves. And so on this Shabbat, as we honor the memory of our matriarch Sarah, may we be blessed with the courage to keep ourselves open, and may we aspire to live like Sarah, with humility, with grace, and the ability to laugh just a little bit at ourselves. Shabbat Shalom.